YouTube land. I'm back. Been a while. Let's see. Since the last time I streamed, I changed jobs several times. Looking for something that fit better. Had a daughter. And various other things. So it's been a little while. Been a lot of life changes. But I am back. And I am discussing... it's a fairly good movie, but there's a lot of ways it could have been better. Age of Ultron. On how it could have been better. Ultron is a villain that has a lot of history. He was created by Hank Pym. Not Tony Stark. Hank Pym. He's made his first appearance way back in Avengers number 54. He was not named in that comic, but he was shown. He was one of them antagonists. Yeah, he's been around a while. I believe that was 1968. That was one of my main gripes with this movie. He was just created as a villain right then and there by Tony Stark, and that's it. No backstory, no history with the Avengers, nothing. And that didn't do justice to his character. And so that's one thing they could have done a lot better. Instead of just tossing him in as a villain, tossing him in as this... Oh, hello. Can't see who that is. But hi. Anyway, so yeah, it's one of those things where they could have done that a lot better. Like, had him show up in the background of some other movies. Had him show up as like a side villain somewhere or something like that. Give him a history with the Avengers. Give him something other than, oh, he was just created and he's the villain of the day and the Avengers need to stop him. That's it. They did a much better job of that with Loki in the original Avengers, because Loki showed up in Thor and he's shown up other places and he has a history. And we know his history. And Ultron, if you look at his history, he's really interesting. And I didn't find Ultron in this movie to be very interesting. They needed to give him more character. I'm going to keep doing this and comparing the two Avengers movies because, well, they're sequels. They're related to each other. But in the first Avengers, Loki had so much character, so much charisma, so much presence, and he was a threat. He nearly took over the world. He was a worldwide threat. And the Avengers struggled against him. They almost lost. Ultron didn't have that so much. Ultron, I never once, during Age of Ultron, the movie, thought the Avengers were going to lose. They barely struggled. There was no real threat or danger of them losing and not saving the day. It didn't feel like there was any danger of that at any point. And that's something, there was no tension, basically. And that's something that they could have done a lot better in Age of Ultron. They could have created a lot more tension. Honestly, it would have been better had they brought in some of the other elements from the original comic book arc. Like, the original comic book arc involved two different timelines. One timeline where Ultron had completely taken over, and another timeline where Morgana Le Fay had taken over half the planet. and it involved time travel and all that stuff, and so on and so forth. Really complicated, kind of convoluted storyline, but they could have brought in some of those other villains, like Morgana Le Fay, and it would have made it a lot more interesting. I also found it distracting from the main plot. The whole thing with Vision just it distracted from the main plot and just made it like what was Ultron's intention with creating Vision? Like in the original arc, in the original comic book arc, Ultron created Vision because he was using him as a conduit to get his copies of himself to the past, to take over the world sooner, basically, to punish the Avengers and such. A lot of the Avengers actually got killed during the comic book arc, including She-Hulk and Luke Cage. But the only person who died in the movie was Quicksilver, and he was kind of a non-character. Like, what did he do? Like, he had almost no lines, no personality. He was a throwaway character to begin with. And I don't think he was even mentioned by name. I don't think that either him or Scarlet Witch were. I'm even sure they were actually who they... Yeah, no, they were. They were mentioned by their actual names. But they weren't mentioned as Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, as it should be, because that wasn't Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. Scarlet Witch single-handedly could have taken down Ultron. She's incredibly powerful. But anyway, that's neither here nor there, because she wasn't involved in the original Age of Ultron. And Quicksilver had a part to play, but not a major one. The major players in the original Age of Ultron arc were Wolverine, the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, of course. Tony Stark played a rather large role, but he did not create Ultron. He just was kind of cleaning up Hank Pym's mess. Cable, Scott Summers, Cable, the other people. X-Men were involved, of course, because of Wolverine going back in time and all that. Try and kill Hank Pym to keep Ultron from happening. He killed Hank Pym, screwed up the timeline, created an alternate timeline. They could have done that. I'm sure they could have worked that in, or worked something else out where Ultron was a more threatening villain, because he just wasn't. I mean, the voice actor did a fantastic job. I'm not saying he didn't do a good job. I'm not saying this is a bad movie, but he just didn't seem to be a threat. I mean, yeah, he was threatening to destroy the whole planet and kill all humans because of Sokovia being lifted up and all of that and everything, but if I had it my way, Sokovia wouldn't have been involved. Sokovia, to my knowledge, was actually something created specifically for this movie. It never existed in the comic books. But if I had it my way, the plot would have been that Ultron needed vibranium. He wanted to make himself nearly indestructible. Now, in the original comics, it was adamantium that he made himself out of. That's neither here nor there. Vibranium is nearly as powerful as adamantium, so there you go. But if you want to make it different from the comics, but still good, have him try and take over Wakanda. Involve Black Panther. Black Panther was involved in the original story. Why not involve him here? Have Ultron try to take over Wakanda so he can get all the vibranium, make himself an army of vibranium Ultrons, basically, and have that be the plot. It would have been much more interesting. It would have made him a real threat. An army of vibranium Ultrons. My gosh, that would be a worldwide threat. That would be a real threat for the Avengers, and they would struggle because let's say he gets a few, or he gets his main body made out of vibranium. Huge threat there. One second.